I opened my eyes and squinted. The light was so bright, and for a moment I almost forgot where I was. That moment didn't last for long, though, because almost immediately I felt them. It was as if someone had come along and attached 2 coconuts to my chest. Was this what it felt like to have big breasts? I'd done it. I'd really done it. I was now the proud and slightly in pain owner of a 34 double D pair of breasts. I tried to sit upright against the back of the hospital bed, but it hurt. The surgeon had warned me that I'd feel tender for the first week or so, but I hadn't expected it to be this painful. How would I even get out of bed? A nurse passed by and saw me struggling. She propped me up against the bed and told me I needed to rest. Then she smiled reassuringly at me and told me that I looked great. Did I wondered. Or had this all been a mistake? I allowed myself to get lost in my thoughts for a bit, thinking back to all those moments in high school where I'd allowed my insecurities to get the better of me. It's not like I was ugly or anything, but had I been the most flat-chested girl in school? Yes, I had been, and it had bothered me a lot. I remember this one time when Savannah, the most popular girl in school, had invited us all to her sweet 16th pool party. I'd been so terrified of everyone seeing how non-existent my chest was that I'd actually stuffed my baby brother's Play-Doh inside my bikini top. It had been the closest thing I could find that might have been similar in texture to breasts, and when I looked in the mirror nervously before the party, I thought they looked pretty real. Of course, I hadn't anticipated that Drake would come up behind me and push me into the pool, my Play-Doh fake breasts falling out of my bikini top and landing with a plop on the surface of the pool. I remember the horror and shame I felt as they sunk to the bottom, and that was pretty much the turning point for me. Never lived it down. From that day on, I was constantly teased about it, even my so-called friends who still bought me Play-Doh every time it was my birthday. And of course, Savannah's voice still echoed inside my head. You know, Polly, if you're that desperate for bigger breasts, why not just get surgery? Like, if I was as flat as a pancake, like you are, I'd defo get surgery. And so that was why I found myself lying on this bed in the cosmetic surgery ward, staring down at my new breast implants. I told myself it wasn't because of Savannah, and that it wasn't because of the pool incident. It was because I was an independent young woman, and I could do whatever I wanted. If I wanted bigger breasts to make me feel secure, then so what? And I paid for them myself. Okay, that last part is a bit of a lie. You see, when I went off to college, my parents gave me an allowance for the whole year. My parents aren't that well off, so I knew I had to budget carefully. Well, I'm sure you can guess what I did. I got to college, located the nearest cosmetic surgeon, and scheduled an appointment. I was supposed to bring someone along with me so that they could drive me home, but there was no one I felt comfortable enough telling. I mean, of course, people would notice soon. It's not like I could hide them from anyone. They were huge. I'm pretty petite, so they stood out a lot. That first week, I wore baggy sweaters to hide them. They were a bit bruised from the surgery, so I didn't want anyone else to see until they were fully healed. I was staying in a dorm with 2 other freshman girls, and so there was no way they wouldn't notice. They squealed when I showed them, and one of them said, "Oh, girl, the guys are gonna be all over you." And they were. After they'd healed, I felt confident enough to wear low-cut tops for the first time in my life. No longer did I need to hide my flat chest. I felt feminine, and maybe now I'd finally get a boyfriend. No guys had been interested in me in high school, and I convinced myself that it was because I'd had no breasts. Well, hi boys, look at me now. And they did look. They looked a lot. I was still shy, so whenever I caught someone staring at them, I blushed. Eventually, though, I started to enjoy the attention I was getting. It made me feel like I mattered, and that I was attractive. Pretty soon after, I met a guy called George at a party, and he asked me if I'd like to go out with him sometime. I was so excited that I said yes, and then quickly ran off to find my friends to tell them. They hugged me and we did a celebratory dance. Then I realized that it was kind of rude of me to run off like that, so I headed back to the room where George was. As I entered the room, I couldn't see him. Then I spotted him. He was standing with a group of guys and they were all laughing. As I got closer, I realized what they were laughing at. He was holding 2 balloons in front of his chest, and even though the music was loud, I could still hear what he was saying. "Hi guys, I'm Polly. Do you like my fake breasts? Look at me, look at me." nauseated. He'd literally just asked me out on a date, and yet there he was mocking me in front of everyone. He was no different from the boys I'd gone to high school with. I ran out of there in tears and didn't stop running until I was back in my room. How had he even known they were fake? And why did he think it was okay to laugh at me like that behind my back? I suddenly felt so lonely. All I wanted was to go home to my parents, tell them what I'd done and hope that they'd forgive me, but I couldn't. They'd be so angry at me and they'd probably never want to speak to me again. The worst part was that I had to see George every day as we were in the same class. He didn't even have the guts to come and apologize to me. I knew someone must have seen me crying and running out because he didn't speak to me ever again and never asked me why I wasn't interested in that date with him. It was because of him that I started thinking, had I made a mistake? Why couldn't I win? I was teased for being flat-chested, and then I was teased for having implants. Would the suffering ever end? I kind of fell into a bit of a depressive slump after that, and I should probably have mentioned earlier how much I loved ballet. I had been taking classes ever since I was a little girl, but now, since having my implants, it was not the same anymore. That first class after the surgery was really tough. I didn't feel as light on my feet anymore, and the more I practiced, the more pain I felt. Every time I did a pirouette, I would get a sharp pain in my back. My ballet teacher could see that I was in pain and said that maybe the implants were too big for me. After all, I was very petite. The one thing I thought would change my life for the better was actually destroying it. Boys thought I was shallow, I was in pain, and even my ballet teacher was treating me differently. And to top it all off, I was seriously running out of cash. I'd spent 90% of my allowance for the year on the surgery, and I barely had enough left to pay for food. There was nothing else for it. I'd have to get a job. I applied to a few bookshops, but none of them hired me. It got into my head that it was because of my implants. They were judging me and assuming I was some bimbo. Finally, I decided to apply to a diner. I saw they had an ad out front, and when I went in to ask about it, they hired me on the spot. In fact, they pretty much hired my breasts on the spot, because that was the only place the manager was looking. I swear he didn't make eye contact with me once. I felt sick at the thought of working for such a man, but also I needed the money desperately. My life became a monotonous routine of study, work, sleep, and I was in so much pain from the implants that I ended up having to see a chiropractor to try and help ease the back pain I was getting. It was a never-ending cycle, and every spare dollar I had went towards finding a more comfortable bra to support my implants or on pain medication. Christmas was coming, and that meant I would have to see my parents. There was no way I could hide this from them, and they were already pretty angry at me as my grades weren't as good as they used to be. I could hardly tell them that I spent every waking hour working instead of studying because I'd spent all their money on trying to boost my confidence. It was seriously a disaster! Just before Christmas, I was working on one of my last shifts at the diner for the year. I felt relieved to get out of there. I was sick of my manager staring at my chest, and that shift was no different. I have never been so upset in all my life. All those fears I'd had about people perceiving me as shallow and attention-seeking were coming to the surface, especially that I was never used to it before the surgery. As I walked home in the snow, tears running down my cheeks, I made the decision to tell my parents and ask them to help me to get these stupid implants removed. Getting breast implants was the worst thing I'd ever done in my life. I couldn't live like this anymore. Well, my parents were, of course, furious, but more than that, they were upset. Upset that I'd been such an insecure teenager, and upset that I'd betrayed their trust like this. That Christmas vacation, they could see how much pain and humiliation my implants brought me, and without me even asking them, they offered to pay for me to get them removed. I didn't even have to think about it. I knew it was the right decision, and I was so unbelievably grateful that my parents supported me, even after how I'd betrayed them. I can't explain the lightness I felt when they were removed, not just physically, but also mentally. I felt like a weight had been taken off of me. I could breathe again and practice ballet. And I even got a job in the library so that I could pay my parents back for the removal surgery. This time, no one looked at my chest. In fact, no one even cared. I realized that my insecurity about the size of my breasts was self-inflicted, and that true friends couldn't care less about how big or small they were. Getting implants was seriously the biggest mistake I've ever made. But hey, if I hadn't done it, I might not be as happy and comfortable in my own skin as I am today. I guess there's always a lesson to be learned, even if it's a pretty painful one. What do you think of my story? Please share your comments and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.